qualifying reason.
Good. And the job changed. The nature of the business changed. Your job changed. You no longer really fit the bill. You no longer really qualify. What happens then?
Yeah, again, that's one of those issues that you'd have to look at. And again, there's a lot of case law on whether or not those are grounds to leave your employment. Hours. Let's suppose you were working standard, 9 to 5 job, and your employer said to you, we don't have that job anymore, we need you on the 3rd shift. And you say, I can't work the 3rd shift, I have children at home, I've got to take them to different places, whatever valid reason you might offer. Is that now a grounds if you leave that job that they'd say you're disqualified for unemployment benefits? And it's a two-pronged test, I would argue there. Number one, did the conditions change? Well, clearly they did. But is there an underlying reason why you cannot work those conditions? I mean, if you had no excuse and you left, it's probably not going to be a reason for them to give you unemployment.
Is child care a legitimate?
Child care would be legitimate. I would argue care, let's say you had someone at home who was sick, a parent or a spouse. Or someone. I think those are legitimate reasons to say why that change in the working conditions made it impossible for me to do that job.
Okay.
I've had another case, and this was interesting, where somebody worked at a retail operation in one store, and they wanted to move her to another store. And she had 2 problems with that. Number one, the store they wanted to move her to was in an area that she didn't think was safe. And number 2, where she was able to go home between her breaks and look after her father who was homesick and had an illness, a condition that was not going to just be a short-term problem but long-term. And so she voluntarily left. And the issue was that disqualifying for unemployment, and the referee held that it was.
Really?
He did. And his reason was that there were arrangements that could have been made on the safety issue, if there was even one in his mind. And the taking care of her father, who was at home, not living with her, was not reasonable grounds for her to say that she had to leave work.
Another, I guess, question about this. Suppose the circumstances that my coworkers or my boss harassed me and I quit. Do I qualify for unemployment then?
Again, that's something that will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But there is case law that says if there's harassment going on at work and you've made that known to your employer and they do nothing to change that could be grounds to leave work and collect unemployment. It could also be grounds to sue your employer for what I would call a constructive discharge. You wanted to continue working, but the working conditions were so bad and the employer did nothing about them to correct the conditions that they constructively fired you wrongfully.
Oh, is that the same? How does that apply to if I had some other injury on the job and then I had to quit, or thought that's a workers' compensation situation? What you're describing is not workers' compensation,
right? Because
or is it?
It's not workers' comp because you weren't injured at work and unable to work. You were just working on conditions that were so intolerable, oppressive, that didn't allow you to continue working there. And actually, I've had a mix of those cases. We had a case once where someone was being harassed, I'll say sexually. Okay. He was a homosexual, but they were just harassing him because of that and other things, to the point where he had mental and physical symptomology. And so he had both a workers' compensation case, a wrongful discharge or constructive discharge, and a civil rights action based against his employer based on the action of the other employees.
That's a pretty complicated case.
Very complicated.
What kicks in first? Did workers' compensation give him money first? Did unemployment? How did that happen?
We will quickly cover one of the
That's
prongs.
a long process.
But it's good because you can quickly cover one of the eligibility issues of unemployment. Is he available for work, other work? He wasn't, because he was so depressed, distraught, post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever symptomologies and names you want to give it, that he couldn't work at all. So he was not qualified for unemployment. He could have gotten TDI, and probably, my recollection isn't 100%, but may have gotten TDI first. But as a condition of getting TDI, you have to apply for workers' comp because it's an offset. You can't get both comp and TDI, and the state wants to make sure if you're eligible for comp, you apply. So he applied for workers' comp and did get on workers' comp in that case. And once he was on workers' comp, the negotiations about the third-party case, if you will, the wrongful discharge case, then were set in motion.
So that's how that played out. How you had alluded earlier to TDI. How does that factor into this?
Okay. We talked a little bit about the 4 factors of eligibility. One of the factors of eligibility is that you're available for other employment. So when you get on unemployment, you have to be actively searching for another job, checking in with the state agency. And
they want a list of where you applied, who you called, and when.
What have you done? What have you done to try to find employment? And that's grounds that they could knock you off if you don't. When you're injured and can't work, you're not available for other jobs. And then you wouldn't qualify for unemployment, but you may qualify for temporary disability insurance, which is another thing that you paid in for.
How long does that last?
It's a finite period of time, again, based on making sure you paid in for the correct number of quarters. And I'm not exactly sure what the extent of it is. I'm pretty sure it's shorter than unemployment, especially with the extended benefits, but it's for a different purpose. It's for employees who are separated from their employment, from their job, but not for reasons that there might not have been work, but because they can't do their work due to illness or injury or whatever.
Is it likely that someone is more apt from the time they are separated from their job to look to unemployment benefits first, or would they know or think about applying through their work to get TDI? What's likely to happen first, that from the employee's point of view?
I think most people who aren't working think about unemployment first, and it really is your natural place to go.
Course.
But I would assume that when you fill out the application, if there's any mention that you're injured or ill or whatever, you'll be notified that you may not qualify for unemployment. You should think about TDI.
It makes sense that while we said that there are various states that will have different laws, almost all of them could be Googled under the Department of Labor and Training, I assume right now, and ours is dlt.ri.gov, and I think that's a good place for people to start. They can still call an office, apparently, but you're saying at this point, with 19% unemployment, at least in Rhode Island, that they perhaps are better off to start the process through online if they can do that.
If you can, you absolutely want to start online, because when you call, good luck getting someone to answer right away. It's like calling to take food out at Twin Oaks, I think.
Are there any other restrictions? We have a short amount of time left. Any other things that you know that we need to review with unemployment?
You know, I think we did cover most of the important ones. We could talk a little bit about what's the difference between being an employee of someone or an independent contractor, because that was one of the prongs that I had mentioned that we didn't really cover. And the leading case on that is sort of interesting. Taxi cab company, you lease your taxi from another company. Are you their employee or the independent contractor? And since they can't control what you do with the cab, you're not an employee, so you're not eligible for unemployment benefits.
We might need to follow up on that a little bit later, and also about self-insurance. We didn't have a chance to talk about that either. We thank you for tuning in. Please, we ask you to send any of your questions to legalmatters@fullchannel.net. We may finish this topic up. Also, we had talked about the changing laws with credit and charge cards. That may be another timely topic that we need to discuss. And hopefully Jackie will be back with us next session and might weigh in on the Massachusetts side of it if there's more to add to that. So we thank you for watching, and we hope you'll be with us, join us in our next session, and the discussion of legal matters continues.